Hello, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Um, we are going to get started. Uh, Welcome again. On behalf of Indo-American Community Services, I would like to welcome you to meet the author of the book, Hardwired for Happiness, Ashish Kothari. I am Srinivas Katragadda, President of Indo-American Community Services. Indo-American Community Services mission is to increase diversity in workplaces and to provide a world-class uh, leadership platform and a networking platform. Indo-American Community Services hosts several leadership programs, including annual leadership conferences, uh, entrepreneur conferences, women's leadership events, virtual career expos, student internship programs, young leaders programs, and mentoring programs, and many other leadership enrichment programs. We are really excited to host today's Meet the Author event. Here, Ashish Kothari is an executive coach, author, consultant, and founder of Happiness Squad. Prior to starting Happiness Squad, Ashish was a partner at McKinsey and spent over 2 decades helping thousands of leaders succeeding by building new mindsets and capabilities. He also serves on the Indo-American Community Services Advisory Board. Also, Gautam Jha is here. He is the Director of Supply Chain at American Securities, helping with their portfolio companies in optimizing costs through strategic sourcing, lean operations, and supply chain initiatives. He had the opportunity to read this book, Ashish book, and he's helping us to moderate this discussion. Again, all of you welcome to this wonderful discussions. And I know many of you have been waiting for this and sending information on this. And we are happy to send you books, whoever registered. Almost 50 copies have been sent to all of you. And we would love to give you this opportunity to really talk with Ashish and as well as Gautam. If you have any questions, please send it on the chat. Then again, we would love to have a group picture with this book all of you received, right? So it really helps Ashish and everybody else. And it's a great way to have a community of readers together and having the discussion. Again, it's my pleasure to welcome Ashish and Gautam. Gautam, you can take it from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Srinivas. And thank you to the IACS community for hosting this. So I think we are really glad to have Ashish Kothari here today. He just launched the book yesterday. It was a very successful launch with a lot of, so if you are on LinkedIn or other media, you would have seen a lot of buzz around this book. So, and I would say welcome to all the participants. I think we all make hundreds of choices every day. And joining this webinar was one of those choices you made today. And I am confident you will find this is the best choice you made today among all the decisions you had to make. I say that because I've read the book. There is something for everybody in this book, no matter what spectrum you are at in your professional or personal journey. You will find something of nugget you will find it that will help you. So with that, why don't we just get started? Ashish, as Srinivas mentioned, you have had a spectacular career, right? Professionally, you started off your journey at Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay. You have MBA from a very prestigious University of Chicago, Booth School of Business. You worked at McKinsey for 20 plus years, climbed up the ladder. You were a senior partner. you are wired, right? You're wired to deliver big, impactful projects, from dollars to cost transformation. You probably met all the CEOs. So, what led you to this journey of pursuing happiness? So, describe us or help us with that path or decision.
Yeah, of course. But absolutely, Gotham, happy to share that. But first of all, just thank you for everybody for joining and in this conversation. Srinivas, thank you for having me, hosting me. IACS has been such an amazing family, frankly, and the work that you all do to kind of really support the next generation of leaders is truly, truly amazing. So, I'm really grateful, frankly, to have an opportunity to serve on the board and to kind of really participate. Thank you. So look, I think for me, Gautam, this actually came, let me take you almost 5-6 years back, right, to this, to kind of what precipitated this and why I wrote the book, right, and what I'm launching now. So look, I was 43. I had, as you mentioned, I grew up in India, went to IIT, and for frankly, 20 years, I had executed on a script that so many of us learn, right, growing up, especially, many of us who are immigrants, who are, we learn the hustle culture from day one. America is a hustle culture, but I think India has a bigger hustle culture, right? Study hard, work hard, get promoted. We all consciously or unconsciously are, living in a way in which we are chasing wealth at the expense of health, love, and meaning. And wealth can be financial wealth, it can be professional wealth, promotions, it can be degrees, it can be skills we're picking up. But, for the first 15, 20 years, many of us give all we've got to our work. Everything else, then we give whatever is left to families, and self is a far distant memory, right? We'll do that when I retire. That's the world we live. And like you do, and I think the notion we pick up is success. If you're successful, you'll be happy, right? Success had come, right, in many ways for me. I was, as you mentioned, I was a partner at McKinsey, one of the leading consulting firms. I had a loving wife. I had a beautiful son. We lived in Boulder, Colorado. I've always been blessed with a large set of friends around me. My clients loved me. I had developed an expertise that was very much in demand. Developed, multiples of impact against the fees that we charged them. My colleagues were amazing, right? I love the firm. I mean, even though I've left the firm, I'll always be a McKinsey person. So if you hear me, right, everything was going amazing, right? What else is missing? And yet my reality was that every day I was waking up with high degree of anxiety, feeling like I needed to throw up. There was nothing wrong externally, okay? Nothing wrong externally, but internally I was struggling. And a lot of people said to me, Ashish, you should see, have you considered. And I would fake it, right? I would have this mask of like, life is good. And you'd go out because, why would you want to share? I'm struggling, right? And a lot of people said, go see a therapist. And I said, what am I going to talk to the therapist about? I have no trauma in my past. My present looks freaking amazing and the future looks bright. So I'm like, what are we going to have a conversation about? Right? Like, I don't think that is the path. But I think the answer is, but I was curious around saying, okay, I've always been a lifelong learner. And I said, what, let me read, let me figure this out. And I started reading and I started looking for answers around human flourishing in 3 disciplines that are actually, they don't really go together, okay? I started looking at answers in our spiritual wisdom traditions, right? Yoga Sutras and Upanishads, Buddhism texts, Taoism, Stoicism. I read the Bible, I thumbed through the Quran. But then I also started looking in 2 other fields. I started looking at what we were learning from the field of psychology around how we make sense of the world. And I also started studying texts from neurosciences about why our brains interpret things as the way they are, right? To look for answers around human flourishing. And as I started playing, I also trained as a coach. I did courses with different mystics. I love Sadhguru. I did the inner engineering and the Shambhavi Kriya with him. I did courses in neuroscience. And as I started, Gautam, integrating these practices, things that I was learning from different pieces, constantly experimenting, working with others, my life changed. I rid myself from anxiety. I rid myself from many of these fears. And 3 years, it was a very different experience. I was really, quote unquote, living, I was living the high life. And then COVID hits. Okay. And that gave me an unbelievable opportunity, Gautam, on 2 dimensions, right? The first one was I realized I had a chance to actually work on a program for McKinsey for 2 years around adaptability and resilience, right? So it truly allowed me to learn. See, the first 3 years, it allowed me to learn how to, frankly, in one-on-one settings, individuals as well as myself, work through, my own experience of the world and live more joyfully, right? The McKinsey work over the last 2 years helped me figure out how to do this at scale with organizations. So how do you take 50,000 people spread globally through a journey that allows them to actually thrive and not just survive the epidemic, right? Survive the pandemic. I also realized how far the extent of the stress, anxiety, burnout the issue is in our community, right? It's a secular issue, right? Here, I thought this was only me. And what I found as part of the research was it's actually, 40-60% of people are exhausted, stressed, or burnt out. By the way, this is not an issue that is just an issue that the poor have. The rich have it too. It's not just an issue that senior executives have. It's an issue that frontline workers have it too. It's not just an issue that teachers and nurses and doctors have. It's an issue that consultants and investment bankers and private equity has too. It's not just that the US are stressed and burnt out. India, China, Europe, these are issues there as well, right? So it was very, very secular. And frankly, it was all of this coming together, Gautam, for me, that I decided to say, hey, you know what? I need to be able to codify my learnings into a guide, into a book that anybody can actually access and use this as a way to fundamentally transform themselves as individuals and transform their communities and organizations, right? In fact, it's this commitment to this mental health priority that, for actually this week, Gautam, as I was sharing before, all the proceeds, all the profits actually from sales this first week of the book, I'm actually donating it to a mental health foundation. It's going to a foundation set by my dear friends Raj and Laura at Kellogg at Northwestern, and they really provide mental health services to students who need it. But this was the reason I wrote the book, and this is the reason behind the company is to take these insights around how we can live happily with better health, more love and meaning, and truly be able to democratize happiness, to be able to bring this and make this accessible to anybody and everybody.
That's fantastic.
That's the journey.
No, and that you laid it out very well personally. And I think, Ashish, we are seeing this more broadly, as you mentioned, but with great resignation, with COVID people coming out, burnout. So this is also, a situation that every company is facing. And is probably trying to put a little bit more time and effort behind to solve, right? So it is probably, you probably have some stats that you may be able to share that kind of indicates that this was more of a personal journey for you, but this is happening in every organization, no matter how small or large.
Absolutely, right? So look, consistently, if you look at the data out there, right? And I'll just give you some of the stats, which are both the underlying stats, but also the overall, right? So, you look at data, whether it's from IBM, Microsoft, Gallup, McKinsey, all the work we did, Deloitte, 40 to 60%, in some cases 60 to 80% of people are basically stressed, exhausted, burnt out. Now, burnt out is literally a technical definition of burnout, right? It's recognized by the WHO. And it shows up in three ways. There's a technical instrument called the Maslow burnout inventory that looks at three things: our level of efficacy, like how do you rate your effectiveness at working, your mental, how distant you feel from the work, if you will, right? Do you feel mentally distant? And also your level of physical fatigue and exhaustion. And we are seeing 40 to 60% of the people burnt out, right? By the way, this has been actually going up over the time. If you look at the drivers behind it, a big part of the driver is the fact that for most people, the job is just a place they go to earn money. It has no personal meaning. According to Gallup, 30% of people are engaged. For the rest, 70%, the work doesn't have that meaning. And I say, what a travesty, right? I mean, frankly, what is the difference if we don't find meaning at work? What is the difference between us and the slaves of yesteryears? I mean, the only difference is we might get paid 10,000 or 100,000 or 20,000 or whatever per month, and they got a roof and a shelter and food. We're still in survival mode. We're just doing this. I mean, the work is the second most activity that takes up our time. The first one is sleep. We have to find work and make it meaningful to people. So loss of meaning is a big part. Loneliness. 60% of Americans report loneliness. We are more connected than we've ever been as a generation, and yet we are lonelier as a generation, right? The level of psychological safety and belonging in organizations has completely eroded. And so it's all of these underlying factors, that are frankly, behind the epidemic of stress, anxiety, and burnout. But, the insight is our natural tendency often is, okay, so it's the others to blame, right? It's the companies to blame, it's the leaders, it's the system, it's the economy. And my insight, Gautam, was actually we can thrive, right? There is a role for all of these other people that we're blaming. They have a role, but I think it's a 30% role. 70% of our state of emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being is something that we can control, right? And fundamentally, if we learn to master our inner worlds, if we integrate many of these practices I write about into our lives, we can actually experience the world differently. And through that experience, truly thrive and unlock our full potential.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. Something you mentioned earlier in the opening, like it's a hustle culture, especially for all of us. We've been working really hard, and we are in this, repeat loop where we get up every morning, go to work, and we are hustling and hustling and hustling, and we're not able to step back, take some time, and evaluate if we are truly, pursuing what our passion, our journey, or happiness, right? And in your book, I would call up for the folks who actually got the book. Actually, you start off with this Oxford happiness questionnaire, right? And it's a good gauge. And when I first looked at the book, and it's only 20 to 30 questions, but I said, hey, listen. And folks, if I could just ask everybody to mute, if you don't mind, we're getting some background noise. So if we could just please ask everybody to mute, that would be very appreciated. So you start off with that, and I think sometimes we just glance it over and we say, oh, we have seen many of these, and this is not the case. So I think you said it really well, that we should just step back, evaluate, and see what can be done there, right? And anything else or tools you would recommend people, Ashish, as a starting point?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, I think it's a great starting point to assess, right? And I think also thinking about that measure, the Oxford Happiness Questionnaire, look, there's tons of things that we can look at. There's tons of questionnaires. I just decided to go with that one. Think about it not as a static measure, right? It's not an absolute, where this happiness doesn't live on an index from 0 to 100 to say, my goal is to actually become 70, 80, 90. That's not the point, because suffering is as much a part of life as joy is. In fact, if there wasn't no suffering, what would be the meaning of joy, right? Like, I mean, you can't have light without dark. You can't have up without down. You can't have joy without suffering. So, the idea behind this is to really use it as a way to assess where am I and what are areas where I might be lacking that I can actually work on improving, right? So that's really, really important. I think we have to think about this as this is not about how can we be absolutely happy and get rid of suffering. This is about how can we be happier? How can we be healthier? The focus is on more, right? Continue on this journey. By the way, that is also what research proves, which is, we can't pursue happiness. Those who just pursue happiness actually end up being unhappy. And so if we want to be happier, what we have to do is actually pursue it indirectly. What we have to do is actually integrate practices, right, that are, frankly, are in every wisdom tradition that's ever existed, right? They are secular. But these practices that are proven to fundamentally rewire our brains for happiness versus our evolutionary wiring for fear. And if we do that, happiness ensues.
Wow. That may be a little counterintuitive, because I think, folks probably joined the call today thinking, hey, there is a path or, to pursue happiness. So can you elaborate a little bit more on it? Like, what are these things? It looks almost like a little bit of re-engineering that we have to do of our brain or our thinking as we pursue on this journey.
Yeah, so let's start with kind of what the problem is, right? The problem is actually following. What gets in the way? The problem is the following. Look, if you look at the evolutionary biology, right, and how our brains have evolved, our brains evolved over millions of years to keep our bodies safe and secure. Look, these brains and the intelligence, and specifically their ability to predict threat, spot danger, and prepare us through fight and flight is the reason, Gautam, that we are at the top of the food chain. We're not the strongest, we're not the largest, but yet we are at the top of the food chain, right? We have in fact controlled the external world so much, like almost everything we've tried to control. And that's how we got to the top of the food chain. But the problem is the following. Over the last 20,000 years, the world we have created, our intelligence has met its match. The complexity, the volatility, uncertainty in the world we have created far exceeds that of our human mind right now. Okay? And so the only way that we can actually thrive in it is if we actually take control and truly work on actually increasing the ability that we can in holding complexity. We can't dumb the external world down. We can't try and control it. And we can't because, here's the issue that has happening. First of all, if you look at the external world, it's nothing like the world of millions of years over which we evolved, right? I mean, we don't have tigers and lions roaming around. I mean, I live in Boulder. We do get a mountain lion every winter running through our neighborhood, but usually it's not every day, right? But we have so the environment is very different, but what do we have, Gautam? We have threats to our ego, identity, psychological safety all day long because things don't go the way they planned, right? There's an ecological disaster somewhere. There is, a shooting somewhere. The supplier who I said was going to deliver some products didn't show up with the supplier. Inflation's happening. Economically, we are kind of teetering on, is it going to be a big recession? Is it going to be a small recession? There's a war that seems could escalate into a global war. So we have all of this in the environment, right, that we are constantly bombarded with. And our brains, unfortunately, have no way of differentiating what is a physical threat versus a psychological threat. It reacts the same way, right? So that's the first issue is, much larger, much frequent times that we actually get, triggered. The second issue is the actual response itself, Gautam. So our brains, right, when we sense threat, activate our body to take action by actually, basically shooting this cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol that goes through our body, right? It's the classic stress response. Now, again, really effective against physical threats because all the blood goes through the extremities and we are ready to fight or run, right? Completely maladapted against these psychological threats. Because when our attention focuses on the threat, we lose perspective, we lose the bigger picture, we lose the context. We actually become dumber, right? This was work that Daniel Goleman did almost 20 years ago around emotional intelligence. He coined the word amygdala hijack. That we actually get, we lose our ability to think clearly. So that's the problem. And then the third is our bodies aren't used to getting triggered and not having coping along the way, right? And so we, as a result of constantly being in a state of anxiety, not even breathing fully, rush, go, our bodies start to break down. We face cardiovascular issues, we face heart disease, all these issues. But what's also happening is we do actions because we don't like to feel anxious, right? We don't like to feel afraid. We don't like to feel angry. And so then what we do is we actually cope with it. We cope with it in ways that are not good for us. We numb ourselves, food, drink, Netflix binging, drugs, right? Which again have harmful effects. That's what's playing. And I think it's important for us to recognize and have compassion for ourselves to say, the reason we are suffering, of course, there is stuff happening externally, but the reason we are suffering is because our sense-making organ, our ability to sense what's happening, is actually broken. It is not suited to the world we are living in. And so rather than try and control the external world, why not actually work on mastering our inner worlds? Why not actually upgrade our operating system, our sense-making, core capability so that we can truly thrive?
That's great. That logic or that thinking makes sense. So let's dive into it. Ashish, you mentioned in the book, you've gone out there, read over 500 plus books, 2,000 lectures, and a lot more research has gone up. So why don't you help us describe maybe the 9-step process you've come up, and then hopefully we can deep dive into one or two of them.
Love it.
People get a flavor for the details. Yeah.
So look, at the heart of the practice, Gautam, the heart of the practice, and I wouldn't call it the 9 steps. I would just say there are 9 practices, right? Because oftentimes the question is, do I have to do all 9? The answer is no. Choose the 3 that work for you. Start there. But the heart of it, at the center of it, and I think this is actually a practice that's a must-have. You can't get away without this, is the practice of self-awareness, right? Know thyself has been the teaching for thousands of years, right? Like Yoga Sutras have it. Buddhism has it. It was on the Greek temples. Know thyself was kind of inscribed, right? And it's important because, in the words of Anais Nin, we see the world as we are, not as the world is. Now, how do we see the world? Well, we see the world based on 3 things that are simultaneously at play within us. So let me share that with those who are listening in. The first way we make sense of the world is through our own beliefs, right? We always are making judgments. This is good, this is bad, this is positive, this is negative, this is fair, this is unfair, this is kind, this is unkind, right? How are we making those assessments? We make those assessments based on some standard, some grounding against which we are comparing. They're subjective, right? What might be okay in one culture is not okay in another culture. So the standards are set often based on our culture, based on the beliefs we picked up from our parents, our own life experiences, right? If you did something and you got hurt, the next time you're going to be afraid of doing it. So our own experiences, our own beliefs end up setting certain standards against which we assess the world. That's one. The second is actually our moods. Think about a day when you are actually feeling very positive. You woke up, quote unquote, on the right side of the bed, versus another day when you're just feeling a little down. You experience the world differently, right? If you feel resentment towards a colleague, I see this all the time in organizations, it's just really hard to coordinate action with them. The words they might use versus the words somebody else uses. If a friend said something, we might not get upset. If somebody we don't like, quote unquote, and feel resentment say something, we're ready to jump down their throat. Those words have so much power. we experience them as a personal threat, as a personal attack versus just something that somebody's saying. So our moods play a big role. And then the third is our bodies, right? Something, if you run into an issue, when you're feeling at your best, you've had a good night's sleep, you're not hungry, versus when something happens when you are actually exhausted or you are quote unquote hangry. I haven't eaten all day and like little things upset me, right? So how we experience the world, these three things of somatics, our body, our moods, and our language and beliefs all play together. So one of the simple things that we can do, Gautam, is next time we run into an obstacle and we have a story, we can step back and say, how are these three things playing together? And what might be two other stories that might be true, right? By the way, whenever there is a conflict, if you and I are having an argument, we have a disagreement. How often in your mind are you the villain and I'm the hero? Never, right? Never.
Correct.
There is something wrong in your thinking, you're not getting it, I'm right. By the way, the same is true for the other person. So even that notion of awareness of like, I am holding on to something that might actually not be true. And where is the other person coming from? This notion of self-awareness is a really, really big thing. And I think we can, spend the whole time talking about it. But I think it's an important one. And I think about it in three dimensions. The first one is, through spiritual practices, really starting to tune into what is the nature of awareness, right? Awareness is not our body, what we feel in our body. Awareness is not what thoughts we have. Awareness is more than what we have in our body and in our minds, right? Awareness is what's making sense of it. Sadhguru teaches this a lot. Deepak Chopra has talked about it a lot. The Yoga Sutras have talked about it a lot, right? At its core, it's this notion of when the mind settles, you can truly see the core essence behind it. Till then, we can't really see it, right? In so many different ways. So really tuning ourselves and choosing consciously to separate ourselves, create a distance between our thoughts, our feelings, and our body, okay, is an important part of self-awareness. The second dimension of that is then actually saying, how are we making sense of the world, which is what we deep dove into earlier. What's my belief? What's the standard against which I'm judging? Is that truly something that is universal, or is that just my belief, right? What else might be true? So how we make sense of the world is the second element of self-awareness. And the third level of self-awareness is, how is the other person experiencing me? We constantly live in interaction with each other. How you experience me drives how I experience you, because that in you creates a different response. And so, if we are actually, getting upset by somebody, we should think about maybe what in us is upsetting them, why that's coming back to us. Research done at Harvard consistently shows the more senior we get, the greater is the gap between our own self-assessment of our strengths and how we are showing up versus how everybody else experiences us. And so, we can work, and in the book, you'll find many tricks and tips. You've read it, but for the others, by which we can actually consciously work on increasing our level of self-awareness. Because it is true, we experience the world as we are and not as the world is. And Eslin's words are so true than ever. Yeah. So that's a very, very powerful practice, right? And it sits at the heart. Without this, none of the other 8 we can truly, truly engage in.
I think you mentioned 2 or 3 things that, if not only in personal, but in professional life, one can carry. Again, I think if we have, issues working with co-workers, some senior management, etc., it's like, what story are we telling? Are we pursuing? I think you pointed out rightly, never in the story am I is the other person the hero, right? They're always the villain. So I think just stepping back and what you highlighted, Ashish, and just saying, hey, is my assumption really true about that person? A lot of times, at least at work and when we're working with people, they have preformed biases that we get told or from the friends, and we carry those forward. So are folks doing that? So I think one small thing that everybody can do is kind of open up the aperture and be more willing to kind of look at what we are saying. And the other thing, as leaders, right, we have many folks on this call who are, leading organizations, right? And your book rightly calls it out. And I actually marked this because I just recently got my 360-degree feedback. And page 46 and 47 really resonated with me. So I'm going to just read this, if you don't mind, Ashish, from your book. The higher up you are in an organization, the greater chances are that you'll suffer a disconnect between the two views, your internal view and those who work with you or for you. Dr. Urek found a negative correlation between both the experiences and the power of self-awareness. A higher level of experience can make a leader overconfident in their level of self-knowledge and to determinant to themselves and their organization. So as the people move up higher, they're more confident, they know what that got them there, they're less, willing to listen to their team and their team members back. And that kind of, and then on the page, 47, there are two implications of this, right? First one is that as one rises up in the hierarchy or organization, there are fewer people who are giving them the feedback. So they're not getting constructive feedback. So that's a negative impact. And the second one is the junior colleagues are fearful of repercussion from their boss or, by offering critical feedback. So most people often keep their thoughts and feeling to themselves. And when it gets really bad, they pack up and leave the organization, right? So these are two very powerful things that as leaders, should be very aware of, especially as managers or higher up in the organization, right?
Yeah, I mean, every time, and I even outlined, look, there are many ways in which we can get this, right? Feedback. And I think the one that I even identify in the book, Leadership Circle Profile, I think across all of my research, Gautam, I found it to be such a powerful, powerful instrument because it's actually also grounded in adult development theory, how our own ability to handle complexity in the world expands. And it takes these two dimensions of how reactive versus creative we are. So you can think about how much are we in a mode of control versus inspire. Okay?
Yeah.
How much do we just react out of our conditioned tendencies and how we respond versus how creative, how we are able to step back. And the world, we can all agree today, needs more creative solutions. We don't need old things executed faster in many cases, right? I think the challenges are very different. And the other two axes are all about how relationship oriented we are versus how task oriented we are. And again, relationships are such a heart of our individual effectiveness, success, but also the success of the teams. For sure, my dear friend. I mean, that's the reason I actually talked about that. I think it is the more senior we get, we just get so disconnected. And I think getting into a regular discipline of working with a coach, getting a 360, if your company has it, great, use it. If you don't have it, you do it yourself through something external, but bring it to your team, bring it to your company, because I think it can fundamentally change the effectiveness and the flourishing in your teams.
So if just playing a skeptical role for now, Ashish, so a lot of people would say, oh, I'm quite successful. I'm quite self-aware. I don't think I need this. What would you say when you're doing coaching? You've been my personal coach and you've coached me professionally. So we have what would you say to, people you're coaching who come up and say, I feel I'm quite self-aware and I don't need to be doing this?
Yeah, I will point them towards every true master who we consider masters. If you ask them, they will say, I am on a path of mastery. I am not a master. A path of mastery is a lifelong learning. We are always growing. We can continue to grow, right? You show up on the mat every day. It's a practice. And, all of us have, anybody, to me, the first symptom of somebody who needs to do this work the most is somebody who says, I'm very self-aware.
Yeah.
Because, there is, I think there is so much in all of us, Gotham. We are such complex beings that, like we can spend, you can spend a lifetime studying a blade of grass and you don't understand the blade of grass fully. How can we truly know ourselves fully? And I think that's where, that's what I would say to people is, by the way, is number one, I think that's the reason. And by the way, number two is, let's not intellectually debate about it. Just go get your feedback and then see how self-aware you really are.
Yeah. Excellent. And what I like, Ashish, about your book is it's not just theoretical where you actually go through these things and make people, you give them practical exercises as to what folks can do. So I would highly encourage as people look through this. I talked about that Oxford, happiness questionnaire. There are in every chapter towards the end, it's well laid out as to how you can implement each of those practices. So in interest of time, Ashish, let's try to cover like maybe one or two more. Now, the second practice is purpose in life and kind of do that. And most of us probably who have joined this call are at a certain point in our career or personal life, and we feel we have things going well. And maybe some of us have reached the pinnacle. So how should we consider maybe, how do we find maybe a purpose for the next inning of our life, or even to, redo our current inning, right? So what would you say?
I think purpose is a really important practice too. And look, I think it's about this. I think step number one is just figuring out, do I love what I do 70% of the time? Okay. There's 30% that, there is stuff all of us do that we don't necessarily enjoy, right? Like it's not all aspects of our job are enjoyable. I don't live in that myth. But, the 70% of the time is what I am doing meaningful. And I always say, use this test. If you had 6 months to live, for many people say 6 months is too short, I would just spend time with my family. I said, okay, if you had 1 year to live, maybe 2 years to live, would you be doing what you're doing right now? And if you can't answer yes, then it's time to actually explore. And I think it's time to explore along two dimensions, Gautam. The first dimension is actually it all builds off this context of ikigai, right? If we can truly find something that is at the intersection of what we love, what we are good at, what the world needs and is willing to pay for, right? Let me repeat that. What we love. So what you're doing is something you really love. What you're good at, it leverages your strengths. We all have different strengths, right? I am horrible if I have to make anything with my hands. But I like to think I can think creatively with my brain. I love big picture stuff. I don't like the nitty-gritty details. So example of what I love versus what I don't love. I can do the nitty-gritty stuff. I just don't love it, right? Good. I'm good with, conceptual. I'm not good with actually with my hands, building things, right? So knowing what do I love, what I'm good at. And you intersect at what the world needs and is willing to pay for. Okay, so for most people who have a job, hopefully it at least checks 3 boxes, right? You're probably getting paid because that's something the world needs. Otherwise, nobody gives charity. And it leverages your strengths. Otherwise, you probably would be miserable, or you'd you would have left by now. They would have fired you, or you would have left on your own, right? So my point is, if 3 of the 4 are already in place, the step number 1 always needs to be, Gautam, how do I get curious about what do I love and integrate it into my workplace? Every company, every opportunity has, maybe maybe you're an engineer and you became an engineer, but what you really like is you're an artist in hiding, you like creativity, you like innovation. Go reach out, figure out a way to get involved with the marketing department or something else that you're doing. You know what I mean? Or you really like to kind of help people and that's what you love to do, and all of this is, Start a venture, start something around like a social thing that you're doing with your company, engaging others. Find ways to integrate what you love into your job. Don't settle for less. Okay. So I always say that's step number one. And I offer a bunch of different ways in which we can even explore what we love. Because oftentimes people say, well, I don't know what I love. Well, that's okay. Let's do the work to figure out what we love. And I think there is a way to do that. The second thing is, if you truly can't find, at an intersection, I would say then go somewhere else, which is, let's actually think about fundamentally reinventing. But when we think about reinventing, let's actually start first with what you love. Let's then bring in what I'm good at and find at that two intersection, Gautam, I outlined an approach I actually learned from a couple of professors at Stanford Design School. Amazing, amazing work they did around designing your life and designing your work life. Bill Burnett is one of them. And the idea there is this tool called a mind map, right? So what mind maps do, they come from design thinking. And what they do is, if you start with what you love and what you're good at, it allows you to actually come up with 25, 30 really creative concepts. So these aren't incremental stuff, right? This is not the kind of stuff which says, I did 12 years as an operations consultant. So maybe I can go become a head of supply chain at a company, or I can go run operations at a private equity, or what I mean, I can maybe do something of my own. This says, well, there was something about operations, right? There's something about, if I've really loved operations, if I love real operations, really doing that work, what I'm basically about is actually I'm a continuous learner. I'm never happy with status quo. I'm great at corralling large number of people. I always look for opportunities. Let me think about that and use that as a way to generate a range of options. Okay. Once you generate that range of options, then we can put the commercial screen of, is this needed in the world and can I get paid for it? And all of a sudden you come up with so many different approaches that are non-linear, non-incremental. But I would say, look, reinventing is always hard. Start where you are. Start where you are. Because for 70, 80% of the time, we can find meaning in what we are doing. We can actually fundamentally change it. By the way, the other thing which is so important in this, Gautam, is we can actually help our teams. If we are leaders, we can help our teams find meaning in what they're doing day to day. And I think it's imperative that we engage in those dialogues. And again, I have an exercise in the book that people can use to engage their teams in, hey, what gives you meaning? What will make what I'm asking you to do day to day meaningful? How can I transform what we are working on and create opportunities that you're excited on a Monday morning to show up to work? You say, thank God it's Monday, versus our, thank God it's Friday and I'm so excited the weekend is here.
Yeah.
That's my hope for people.
Wonderful. And Ashish, you touched on this. So this is, these practices are not just, for individual. You can actually deploy this, and you've done this successfully at team level within an organization, at organization level, large and small. So could you give us, for folks listening in here who lead, team members, whether, 5 people or 15 or 50 or 500, like, how can they take these practices? How can this be applied at organization level?
Absolutely. 100%. Again, we go back, Gautam, to, this notion that, look, work is where we spend second most amount of time, right? Other than sleeping. If you want to do the work, you have to use your work as a way to do the work. So, get 12, 14 copies, everybody in the team read it. You learn, you integrate, you have conversations around it. You use that group, which is a natural way in which we work, to say, how do we integrate, Gautam, these practices into the way we work? I'll give you a very simple example, okay? There's a lot of companies who do these things, thankathons, right? We're going to thank people. Once a year, we're going to send something saying, I'm thankful. Or Thanksgiving, we're going to send something to people. What if we just did this? Every week, every team, if not every week, every other week, we all write status reports, right? As a team, we write, here's what's going. here's what we accomplished, here's the goals, here's the risks, right? We always do that. What if in addition we actually created a block which said, and who are the people we want to explicitly thank? What are things that we are grateful for? So instead of, gratitude can be an amazing transformative practice individually, but we can integrate gratitude into the way we work. I'll give you another one, Gautam. Mindfulness. How many people know mindfulness is good, but how many people don't do it because either they say, well, I don't have the time, or, when I sit down to meditate, my mind is all over, so it's useless anyway. So why do it, right? A lot of people are in that. And I say, look, you operate as a team, right? What if you took one meeting a week and you basically said, listen, we're all going to collectively take the first minute of the meeting to take 5 deep breaths. And we're going to just focus on truly arriving. Our bodies are here. Let's actually let our minds arrive too.
Yeah.
Mindful meetings, right? Fundamentally changes the nature. So in the book, what you will find is things that you can actually do right away with your teams. And I think that is beautiful because the teams can provide us accountability. They can provide us inspiration. They can provide us support. But most importantly, if we integrate this into the way we work, then this is not extra work, right?
No, you said it well, Ashish. I go to so many companies as part of being private equity, and I'm out there at my portfolio companies. Many of these industrial manufacturing company, we start meeting with a safety update, right? Somebody has to give a safety update or a update, a point of view on safety. And maybe this is one of those practices that, over time, if we are doing safety, why shouldn't we be also talking about, mindfulness?
100%. Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there are different ways, that we can integrate these into our life. By the way, the data is very clear, Gautam, right? So if you look at the data from Oxford, Warwick, and Gallup, the data is so stark. Cultures that are flourishing, cultures filled with employees that are happier. Take stock of this. 2x the stock market returns than others. 20% more profitability, 25% more productivity, 3 times more creativity, and 65% lower attrition, right? That's the results that we can get if we can truly create cultures of flourishing by fundamentally first transforming ourselves, second, transforming the way we work in teams, and through that, fundamentally changing the organizations in which we live.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned, I'm like buying the book. So, there are folks who can implement this in their, team, whether large or small or organization, BU, etc. And I just wanted to mention, I think you were mentioning this, Ashish, earlier. You have the ebook discounted to $2. So,
Yes.
it's safe to say Ashish is not trying to make money off the book. He's literally giving it away for free. I think they can go to Amazon and get this ebook
They'll
for
have to go to the
$199.
website. They have to go to the website, not the iOS app, right? So if they want the ebook, you go to the website. You can buy it. By the way, if you want a paper copy, I like paper copies or hard copies, so I have that too. If you buy that, for this week, we are donating all profits that we make from those sales to actually a mental health foundation. Because I really, really want, I made it $199 because I wanted to make sure this was accessible to everyone. We are on a mission to democratize happiness. But, if you want to contribute, if you feel mental health is a cause that you want to get behind, please buy paper copies, hard copies, what will you, any which way. And all that money is actually going to a good cause. Yeah.
So all I was trying to say is cost should not be a barrier for folks who want to take this journey. I think the website is happiness.squad.com, Ashish.
The website is happiness.squad.com. Through that, they can also get access to a community that we're building where they can be part, because I truly believe, Gautam, this is a path of lifelong mastery. We work together as learners and teachers on a path that help us rewire our brains for happiness.
That's wonderful. So, and for folks who've got the book, so if you buy the book, I think community is available.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. I think Ashish, the book is so deep, in sense of 9 practices. There's something for everybody to take. And I have my list of 3 things that I'm going to do, and one of them is gratitude that we did not get to discuss. But it is just like you gave an example of how on a weekly or monthly basis we can make that make that a point to call people out, positive reinforcement, and just being personally as well, being kinder and nicer to ourselves, right? So I would highly recommend like folks get the book. It'll be probably the best investment they make. I've got my bookmarks and etc. And how can they reach you, Ashish, if folks wants to get in touch with you? Because I think book is one outlet, website is one. You're also a personal coach. Other things
people
that
can
you would
reach
want
out to
people to
me.
know.
I'm on LinkedIn, Gotham, so they can look me up there. I always, reply. They can reach out to me on ashish@happinessquad.com, my email. They can also, interact on Instagram or Facebook. I actually literally post a 60 to 90 second video every morning. So that's the other way that, people can be in touch and kind of follow what we are trying to do here. Yeah.
Excellent. Ashish, these practices are infectious, and I have been benefiting from it, and I think there's more to
Thank
come.
you.
So we're at the top of the hour. So I think if we want to take a photograph with the book, so if the folks have the photo, the book, we would appreciate if you turn your video on and just come for a second and share the book. Anything else we can do? Srinivas?
Yeah.
Any closing
Gautam,
statements?
you just said it correctly. So if you are all comfortable, please, turn on your videos and show the book that you already have, so that, we can take a group picture. And as Ashish mentioned, right, it is also, he's building a community, and you all can be part of the community. And this is great. I mean, I'm turning on the video. Let's try to get everybody. So is everybody on the video yet, or? Okay. Let's see. All right. Let me.
Excellent. We're getting some good comments. You want to take a picture? Folks are planning to read this weekend. A few other things going on. That's wonderful.
1 second. I'm still getting my book and trying to get this picture done. All right. Thank you.
Thank you
I
all.
will be tagging most of you attended on this conference. On the LinkedIn when we post it. We're looking forward to it. Ashish, thank you so much, and Gautam, thank you so much for this is a great discussion, and I think most people will get benefited from this reading and practicing. And a lot to learn from this book. I'm looking forward to it also. Again, thank you, Ashish. Thank you, Gautam, for your support and doing this.
Thank you all for spending this precious hour with me. Srinivas, thank you for having me. Gautam, so glad that you could join as well and help have such an amazing conversation. Take care, everybody.